and others in the region really don't care for the Palestinians. That they're waiting for them to get a state in order to sort of improve themselves or sort of make themselves more reasonable members of the international community is palpable, demonstrable, obvious nonsense.
Hey folks, this is the other Barack coming to you live and direct from Miami. We have a video today of Douglas Murray talking about a two-state solution from both sides of this conversation. Stick around for the whole video. You do not want to miss this one. Let's talk about it after.
One thing I've noticed whilst being here, now being in London, we're here all the time from the river to the sea, and there's no conversation about a two-state solution. What I've been really struck about here, mainly with Israelis, is that they also aren't talking about a two-state solution.
No.
And for me, I brought that up and I felt anachronistic doing so. It's like, it's a dated opinion. And,
yes.
Even Netanyahu has said he wants total control of that region from the river to the sea.
I would say not. You don't need to say even Netanyahu. People might expect Netanyahu to say that. It's more striking that all of the Israeli left, everybody you speak to in this country, I've spoken to people who are lifelong leftists, lifelong peace now, people who were employing and working with Palestinians from the Gaza, who see no future in this so-called two-state solution. And I think the rest of the world needs to catch up on that. There are a lot of anachronisms about the world's opinion about the country we're sitting in, and lots of just wildly out-of-date, defunct views. The two-state solution was a mantra for a certain type of politician in the West for some decades, but picked up in the 2000s after 9/11 when people wanted to find the sort of solution to the Middle East problem. And they would call it the Middle East problem. And I'd always say, well, which problem are you talking about? This region is replete with problems. Oh no, it's the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. And sensible, moderate people, the sort of David Miliband's, the Camerons, these sorts of people would say, well, the real thing that needs to be sorted out is the two-state solution, the solution of a founding of a Palestinian state alongside an Israeli state. And the thing is, there's sort of two problems with that. One is the idea that if the Palestinians actually had a state called Palestine, that would not mean that the economy of Yemen boomed. It would not mean that the Saudis made greater leaps forward in human rights. It would not mean that the mullahs in Tehran would stop killing girls on the streets of Tehran and other Iranian cities. The idea that the whole of the region is held back because a small population, who the Arabs and Persians and others in the region really don't care for, the Palestinians, that they're waiting for them to get a state in order to sort of improve themselves or sort of make themselves more reasonable members of the international community is palpable, demonstrable, obvious nonsense. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the reality on the ground has just changed, and it's changed for several reasons. One was when the Israelis disengaged from Gaza in 2005, 6, and I remember it very well, and I remember the very fervent debates in this country as well as around the world, and the pressure from the Republican government administration in America to withdraw every Jew from Gaza and hand the Gaza over to the Palestinians and have free and fair elections in Gaza. Well, the Palestinians promptly elected Hamas, who then killed their Palestinian brothers and sisters who were from rival groups like Fatah, threw them off buildings, shot them in the back, dragged their corpses around behind trucks around the Gaza in a celebration. That was an early sign, I would say, that the two-state solution was in trouble, because they'd been given a state in Gaza. And, there were left-wing politicians, many of whom I spoke to, who, they said at the time, you've got all of the infrastructure we left, the international community will give you money, we will give you money. Okay, you're not going to be able to control your airspace, for instance, but you build Singapore. And they didn't build Singapore. The leaders of Hamas enriched themselves and their sons. They bought expensive penthouses in Qatar and around other parts of the world. And they built a tunnel system that's the world's biggest tunnel system. And they launched rockets repeatedly at Israel. And then on October the 7th, they had this big breakout through the fence and massacred people in their homes and young men and women at a party, among other things.
Mhm.
And so anyone who thinks that the Palestinian state, the sort of two-state solution thing is obvious, first of all has to contend with the fact that they were given a state.
Mhm.
They were given a state, and they made it a terror state. And there's no reason why Israelis should have to live beside that, any more than we in Britain should live beside a terror state, or Americans should live beside a terror state lobbing rockets into them all the time. And then you have the problem of the West Bank. And the West Bank is a big problem because I was out the other night again there, and you can see from the bits of the West Bank, which many people think in a two-state solution with the West Bank would be given to the Palestinians, you can see the lights of the city we're sitting in at night. And it's not just that it's within rocket range, it's within artillery range. So the city we're sitting in, if the Palestinians were given more of a state than they have, and they actually have a quasi-state in the West Bank under the control of the Palestinian Authority, if they were given a state, there's no guarantee at all that they wouldn't do the same. In fact, it's almost certain that they would do the same, which means that the entirety of Israel is at constant, not just threat, but likelihood of constant bombardment from every direction, from rockets, RPGs, break-ins, and much more. So it's intolerable. And I think that the rest of the world has not realized this. And it's not just intolerable for the Israelis for this demand, it's something we wouldn't tolerate. I mean, the idea that you would reward, like Secretary Blinken was here again the other day, and he keeps up this thing of, this is why we need to double down on the two-state solution. First of all, you're singing a dead song. And secondly, why should the reward for October the 7th be a gift of another terror state to the Palestinians? I don't see why. But as I say, that's common opinion in Israel across the political spectrum. But the rest of the world hasn't caught up. And I worry about that disjunct.
Does that mean that your vision of the future of this country is kind of a constant conflict?
Well, I don't have a vision for the future of this country. It's not my place to have one. I think that Gaza has been an insoluble problem, and the international community has given it to Israel to solve. I don't see why Egypt shouldn't help solve the problem of Gaza. They share a border with it. Egypt used to own the Gaza. Give it to Israel. Give it to Egypt to solve. And if you were to say that, people say, "Well, we don't want the Palestinians." That's what Sisi and co. We don't want them. Palestinians brought terror everywhere they went. Everywhere they went. Where the PLO went, where Yasser Arafat went, everywhere they went, they brought terror. Whether it was Egypt, Jordan, Tunisia, Lebanon. That's why. So the Jewish state keeps on being told, solve this insoluble problem. Is there a final status solution? Not at the moment, there isn't. And as the center-left president of this country, President Herzog, said to me the other week when I interviewed him, he said, at the very least, it's not the time to talk about it. It would be like asking America immediately after 9/11 to cede territory to a terror group.
But it is the time to talk about how to defeat Hamas. And Israel have made it clear that their objectives, of course, are to take back the hostages, but also to annihilate Hamas. Aside from the militant Hamas terrorists, as much as Hamas is an idea, an ideology, I've heard you say it can be defeated, like Nazism was defeated, like Imperial Japan was defeated.
Like communism was defeated.
But was communism defeated?
Well, largely.
It's still pretty alive. And Marxism is certainly a very popular ideology.
It is, but think back to when we were growing up, how much stronger it was. The Eastern Bloc, much of Europe was under communist control when we were growing up. The Soviet Union was, a major power in the world. But go back a couple of decades before that, and it was rolling out across the world, the communist ideology. It's not gone, but it's certainly not got the strength it had. In the same way that Nazism hasn't completely disappeared, it's pretty rare, but you get the odd little group of weirdos.
China is communist. Well, there are Marxists in our country, in America. compared to Nazism, it's a completely
Yes,
different
that's
story.
true. I mean, well, that's because, of course, everyone knows, everyone who knows anything about history, the rightful moral taint that not just Nazism but fascism had after the Second World War meant nobody wanted to be near anyone advocating that again. Because of all sorts of interesting historical reasons, there are always some people trying to bring back the communist ideal. Sure. Nevertheless, I mean, it's an idea it's taken a heck of a beating. I mean, there are still ignoramuses around who think, it never worked anywhere, but let's try it again. It never provided for the societies, but it will next time. Okay, you can always find some really slow learners and wicked people who do that, but I would argue that the idea has been very considerably defeated. And even in China, you can't call it exactly communism anymore. They call it communism, but it's open to debate at least. Hamas is, yes, an ideology. It's very similar to all other jihadist ideologies. It's very similar to ISIS. It's very similar to Al Qaeda. It's very similar to all forms of millenarian Islamism. But Hamas itself is a structure. It's a group. It's a party. It's an entity. You can destroy that. You can kill the leadership of that. And that's what the Israelis are currently doing.
You can kill the leadership, but it's an ideology it's a group that's got now more support, according to some polls, in the West Bank. Not the case in Gaza.
Yes.
But it's almost like the more victorious, or the more that Israel do destroy them in Gaza, the more popular. It's like it reinforces the ideology.
Yeah, there's a problem with this, and we heard it after 9/11 as well, which was some people said you can't defeat terrorism without creating terrorists, which is a logical circle, because that means all that happens after you're attacked is you just sit back and say, okay, I won't do anything in case I create terrorists, which I don't think is the best policy. What you say about the West Bank, Palestinian opinions about Hamas there is true, but it's been true all the way through. The reason why Mahmoud Abbas is currently, 16 years into his 4-year term, is because they can't have elections in the West Bank, not because the Israelis won't let them, but because the Palestinian Authority can't have them, because otherwise the Palestinians in the West Bank will elect Hamas. Of course, the people who hate Israel in the West Bank will be likely to celebrate any, perceived victory against the Zionists, as they would call them. Well, yeah, but what's Israel's answer to that? Just not attack Hamas? I don't think that's possible. I think that, but I think the question underneath your question is the really tricky one, which I don't have an answer for, because the answer that was there was trodden all over from 2005, which is, a very interesting distinction between that exists that is worth reflecting on, is that there's a difference between psychopaths and sociopaths. Psychopaths are probably born. Sociopaths are made. Gaza is an entity filled with sociopaths. I say that with confidence because 18 years, which is the time that Hamas has ruled Gaza, is of course precisely the length of time of a young man or woman's education. Hamas has had control of the education of Palestinians in Gaza for 18 years, and it has created a generation of sociopaths.
I couldn't have said what he said any better at the end. There's one other thing I want to add, but the math says it all, which is that the level of indoctrination inside of the Gaza Strip is scary beyond, it's incomprehensible to understand what people, kids, teens, the youth are being taught about what they should spend their time doing growing up, which is this pursuit of a fight against the Jewish state, Israel, the state of Israel. And it is really unfortunate because unless you can't just put your finger on the dam and try to hold that thing from breaking, you can't put a bandage on, you can't attack the symptom, you have to attack the source. And it's really scary to think about that conveyor belt, that system just continuing to roll new people in. into being indoctrinated. It's sad to see people get indoctrinated because they don't know they're being indoctrinated. That's the whole point of what an indoctrination process looks like. You're being taught a set of ethos. You're being taught a set of ideas and ideology that you don't think anything else can go against it. If you're indoctrinated so deep and you're being told something so many times, you're going to be so convinced that in this case, the Jews aren't okay, the state of Israel isn't okay, its establishment isn't okay, the fact that it exists isn't okay. And I guess the question that I would pose is, if Israel were to be removed tomorrow, what would happen in this region of the world? Like what happens in that space that we now know as the state of Israel? What happens between Lebanon and Syria and Egypt and Morocco and Iran and Gaza and the West Bank? Tell me what happens. Like, give me a scenario, play out what that looks like day 1, day 2, and day 3. Tell me what it looks like between these nations, between these armies, between these peoples who apparently are the Muslim Brotherhood and have their brothers and sisters that they have, are looking out for each other. But I'd really like to know what somebody's answer is. If you were to just tell me right now, if Israel were to be removed from the picture, what then happens with this region? Do we have a nice prosperous region of Arab neighbors, or do we see something that we all know is inevitable? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for all your support. I'll see you next time. If you want to continue the conversation, you can support my work for free. Discord does not cost a thing. It is the best way to connect with me and others who are seeking the truth. The link is in the description. But if you want to take it one step further, my Patreon gives you access to the Israel you don't see, uncovering the untold stories of what mainstream media does not show you. The link is in the description, and it helps me to continue this work. Or if you're just looking to help this thing go, PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee is a really easy way to support me. This channel, this work does not happen without all of you. Thank you. I love you. I'll see you next time.